All right, well, how's this for a little bit of pressure? Equinox and SoulCycle facing calls for boycott over their investors. Stephen Ross's ties to President Trump and planning to do a big fundraiser on his behalf, I believe, this weekend. Independent Women's Forum senior policy analyst Patrice Lee Onwuka. We've got Democratic strategist David Burstein and constitutional law attorney Jenna Ellis Reeves. Jenna, let me begin with you. I generally think these boycotts are always risky, on the left or the right. We will have our own political points of view. I love Ben & Jerry's. It would have to be a crane to claw me away from Chunky Monkey to stop me from buying their product, no matter who they're giving money to. So enough already.
Yeah, I think that these types of things, especially when you look at SoulCycle having a passive investor here, and then people are willing to boycott over that. I mean, this is a free country. We all have political beliefs. We all can support whatever candidate we want. And to say we're now going to boycott your product just because you support a particular presidential candidate is absolutely ridiculous. And that's not helping anything. And so, I mean, I'm a conservative that goes to Starbucks. People have told me for years, you need to boycott.
Wrapped in a conundrum.
Yes, that's what my husband says. But no, just because there are certain things that are worth standing up for, but this I don't think is one of them, because we've seen that boycotts work. I mean, look at the effect of Chick-fil-A when the left was calling, for boycott. That just then had the supporters go in and say, we are going to support this company because we believe in their values. But in this country, everyone can stand up for what they believe in, and they can have their message. And so if people want to boycott, that's fine. Do I think it's effective? Absolutely not. But people have a right to support their political candidates, and I think that especially the difference here is that SoulCycle said in their statement, we don't condone this. We're not holding this event. And so for people to boycott them just because one of their passive investors is supporting President Trump, I think that's...
Well, he's the head guy. But you're right. He doesn't speak for the company. But
exactly.
Having said that, David, I'm worried about, and maybe you are, when you look at the Democratic Party that's big on inclusion, big on being open to all points of view and ideas, doesn't this smack of hypocrisy?
Well, it is problematic, right? Because either you're for everyone speaking their values or you're for a certain set of values, right? And I think, the issue here is that, and in this particular case, Equinox and SoulCycle are, known for, they have a lot of LGBTQ members, right, and they're known for affinity with that. They've been sponsors of Pride and things like that. And so it felt to them, because it represents a good part of their base, like they had to say something. And, every company's got to do this kind of damage control on everything. But I think and I hope that the presidential candidates don't get involved in this, because this seems to me to be a fine thing for people to talk about on social media. But my hope is that, people can see this is an issue that'll stay here, and we won't be talking about this by the end of the week.
Oh, sure we will. So, Patrice, help me with this. I mean, I see it in my profession where certain hosts are boycotted or no one's going to watch their show and urge viewers to boycott the products advertised in the show. I've seen on the right, I've seen on the left. Mm-hmm. First of all, I always tell people, you got to calm down. I mean, life is short. Just stop it. But the other issue is, if you don't want to watch that particular personality, you don't have to. You have something called a remote control. Move on. But I do think it's going to put the fear of God into companies in general, for fear of offending anyone on the right, for fear of offending anyone on the left, just to cater to whatever the prevailing view is at the time. And I think that's a slippery slope. Your thoughts?
It is, Neil. And, I will counter the comments I think that Jenna made. I actually think it could be damaging if people actually believe it. Let's look at the Ivanka Trump brand. She had a very strong, loyal following and a really strong brand. That has all but disappeared because I think you saw the left turn its machine out against her clothing company as soon as her father became a candidate for president. And so I don't think this is going to happen to SoulCycle. It seems like they have a lot of competition, particularly from in-home biking companies like Peloton, but I think they're trying to do as much damage as possible to ensure that that doesn't happen. And yes, it could become a slippery slope if every company is scared that somebody like Chrissy Teigen turns the social media trolls against them.
What I worry about, though, guys, is just that I was the one who used the Ben & Jerry's analogy here, which would be kind of funny if you're, at one of these facilities, especially the Equinox Fitness, and you're eating Ben & Jerry's ice cream while you're on there. But I think it gets past reality here. Everyone's free to their own political point of view, but when you extend it to I'm going to economically try to destroy them because of that. That gets a little dangerous.
That's what, so Castro coming out and doxing so many of the Trump donors. I mean, this is, and saying specifically on MSNBC that it's for the intent so that people think twice before donating to President Trump. This
But
is
didn't he
how
reveal one of
far
his own
past.
people?
He did,
Yeah.
which was actually super ironic. But if that's the
I think that's
political
Castro
manipulation,
calling David right now.
I
What do you think of that, Dave? Does it go too far?
Well, look, I think the other thing here is that these companies have to also be willing to stand up. And that's one thing, it's like we can talk about the role of citizens in this, but also I think a lot of companies have been very quick to cave. And I think a lot of these people would find that their business will be just fine. I mean, I'm a member at Equinox. Equinox has a very loyal
I've seen you there.
following. I mean, people, so does SoulCycle. They're not going to be destroyed by something like this. And I think,
I don't know. I mean, in this city,
they have a lot of competition.
perception, though, is so bad
but
because
if you're-
when we have a culture that is saying we are going to punish you for your political beliefs and try to silence you, like what Castro is doing, that's not America.
But we've also done a lot to divide these things. I mean, we had this whole debate about Whole Foods in the last election cycle. Whole Foods is for Democrats, and these other supermarkets are for Republicans. Now, of course, there is
That's accurate.
right. Well, but there's been a push. More and more people, more and more companies are focused on being values aligned, and that's important to them. But they have to be consistent in what those values are.
But there
And I
is a
think that's
difference between a
problem.
company and the guy who runs, and I understand that
Right,
can
right,
easily
right,
get
right,
blurred.
right.
Patrice, what I'm thinking is where is this going? Because you're free to support politically anyone you want. I don't know whether there's a higher burden for someone who runs a company, even as a passive billionaire investor in that company. But I do think we have to dial it back a little bit.
Well, I think it could have a chilling effect on a lot of these founders who will say, you know what, a lot of them may be conservative and would say tax policies that reduce taxes, that deregulate, that make it possible for the environment to be conducive to business is how I was able to create this. And they'll maybe potentially step back from supporting candidates or politicians and lawmakers who create pro-business policies. And that would be devastating. Honestly, I think, Neil, I think it would be hurtful. And so I think we, as consumers, we've got to be careful and parse when we're being used by celebrities for their own left-leaning or right-leaning, frankly, political causes versus really understanding whether, a founder and a company are doing something that's harmful. And in this case, that's just not the case.
You were going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it also, the difference between being an investor, being part of a company, and being the founder of the company or the CEO of the company, I think is an important distinction. Because
you are the image of that company.
Right, and
like
someone,
the Chick-fil-A founder.
Exactly,
Right.
and there is a big difference between that. So I don't want to just
Chick-fil-A is
dismiss.
delicious, as has been
And I
encouraged.
just think that there's a
But
difference
the
also
day-to-day.
between what the company actually
Understood.
does versus just the political opinion.
I'm not listening to you. I'm boycotting you.